The Devil Wears Prada 2 has finally arrived on Disney Plus, and of course I jumped at the chance of watching it, and I'm pleased to say it is good, but it's nowhere near the quality of the first film. Now, to be fair, sequels rarely are, so that's not a huge deal, but there are two ways of looking at it. Does it hold up as a sequel? Yes, it does, and I do think it's worthwhile. Often sequels don't really serve a purpose. I am actually glad that this exists. At the same time, judging it on its own, let's say I'd never seen the first film, you could technically watch this without seeing the first film, and I'll explain why I feel that way in a moment. I think it's good. I think it has a lot to offer. This was released, of course, this year in 2026. It's directed by David Frankel. It's written by Aline Brosh McKenna with a cast including, of course, Meryl Streep, Anne Hathaway, Emily Blunt, Stanley Tucci, and various others. We have an amazing cast. The characters are, of course, fabulous. And I will say, first of all, the characters do feel like themselves. They do feel like the characters, and we get caught up with them and where they are in their life pretty quickly, so it's very easy to pick up however many years it's been since the previous film, 20 years, and it's like we never left the characters. And the narrative itself is quite interesting. The pacing is great. We get to the point very, very quickly. Andy is doing well, and then she is laid off, but she gets the chance to go back to Runway, and initially she thinks that Miranda has approved this. It turns out Miranda had not. We have an awkward but fun interaction between them, and then, of course, as the film develops, they spend time together, and we also have, of course, Emily and Nigel, and I just think the characters are so wonderful, and I think they did a really good job with the character writing, the performances. As I said, they feel the same, but they also feel like they've maybe been through a lot in the interim. As for the narrative itself, as I said, I feel like you could watch this without having seen the first film, and I also think it's worthy as a sequel. And this is because it's showing the changes that magazines are facing today. So much has happened in the industry over the last 20 years. Obviously, this is because primarily with changes online, with the way that people consume content, the way that they have to start relying on clickbait, which I think is one of the worst things to ever happen with modern technology, and this reliance on clickbait. I know headlines have always been kind of clickbaity to draw your attention, but I do think it gets to the point where it's a bit ridiculous. So because the industry itself has changed so much, it is a worthwhile sequel, and it feels like a worthy sequel in that regard. I think they did a good job of giving us the characters 20 years later, addressing the industry itself 20 years later, so I'm really glad that it exists. But because of the topic it's addressing, the changes in the industry, how this can affect people, how this can affect publications, you can kind of watch it on its own and enjoy the story. Admittedly, you probably wouldn't get as much out of it with the characters, their development, their relationships, their interactions with each other. All of that, of course, comes from the first film and the journey we've been on with the characters up until this point. But for the story itself, you absolutely could watch this and still get a lot out of it. That being said, I still recommend watching the first film first because it is brilliant. And as I also said, I don't think the quality is quite the same. It doesn't look as good. Visually, I don't think it's as engaging. It's not as crisp. It's not as eye-catching. Maybe this is more about my the fact that my interest in fashion was maybe 20 years ago, but I don't think the costumes are as interesting. I don't think visually the colour palette is good. So I just think the first film looked so much better. I think maybe the storytelling in the first film was a bit more interesting, but I think that's perhaps down to personal preference. I think the actual narrative here is still very well executed. It's addressing some really important topics, so I don't have any issues with the story in this film. I just think the first film looked better, the narrative was maybe more interesting. Fantastic character development in this film, absolutely. Performances are brilliant, of course. So in general, The Devil Wears Prada 2 is a good film. I'm glad it exists. It is not one of those sequels that is just a cash grab and serves no purpose. I think it has a lot to offer. Without doubt, I'm very happy to recommend it. I love the first film. The second film is good. I would watch the first film again and again, many times over. I don't know if I'd ever watch the second film again. It's not quite as shiny and sparkly and crisp and beautiful as the first film. It just doesn't quite have that magic. But at the same time, it's great. Devil Wears Prada 2 is a decent sequel. If you loved the first film, very happy to recommend this. If you didn't like the first film, you might still like this. It does feel a little different in places. The topic, of course, is a little different. So you might still enjoy it. If you've never seen the first film, please do check it out. And then hopefully you'll enjoy the second film as well. The Devil Wears Prada 2 was ultimately worth the wait. I'm glad they made it. And obviously I'm happy to recommend it.